Welcome. In this video, we'll explore the core macroeconomic models that shape our understanding of the economy. From the basic two-sector model to the complexities of open economies, we'll break down each concept step by step. Whether you're a student or just curious about how economies function, you'll find clear explanations and practical examples throughout. Let's start by understanding why macroeconomic models are essential. They help us predict, analyze, and respond to economic changes, guiding both policymakers and businesses. Ready to dive in? Let's begin with the two-sector model. Two-sector macroeconomic model is the foundation of macroeconomic analysis. It considers two main sectors, households and firms. Households provide labor and consume goods, while firms produce goods and pay wages. The model assumes no government or foreign trade, making it a closed economy. This simplicity allows us to focus on the core interactions between consumption and investment. The equilibrium condition here is that total output equals total planned expenditure. Understanding this model sets the stage for more complex scenarios involving government and international trade. Equilibrium in the two-sector model occurs when planned aggregate expenditure equals total output. This means that what is produced is exactly what is demanded. If output exceeds demand, inventories build up, signaling firms to reduce production. If demand exceeds output, inventories fall, prompting firms to increase production. The key equation here is I equals C plus I, where I is aggregate expenditure, C is consumption, and I is investment. This balance ensures the economy operates smoothly without unintended inventory changes. Crucial concept in macroeconomics is the expenditure multiplier. It measures how a change in autonomous spending like investment leads to a larger change in total output. For example, if investment increases, it raises income, which then boosts consumption, leading to further increases in income. The multiplier effect amplifies the initial change. Mathematically, the multiplier is 1/1C, where C is the marginal propensity to consume. This concept helps us understand how policies or shocks can ripple through the economy. What determines the level of equilibrium output in the two-sector model? The main factors are autonomous consumption, investment, and the marginal propensity to consume. Changes in any of these can shift the equilibrium. For instance, an increase in investment raises aggregate demand, leading to higher output. Similarly, if households decide to save more and consume less, the equilibrium output falls. Understanding these determinants is key for policymakers aiming to stabilize or stimulate the economy. Consumption and saving are two sides of the same coin. The consumption function shows how much households spend at different income levels, typically written as C equals Ca plus Cy, where Ca is autonomous consumption and C is the marginal propensity to consume. The saving function is derived from income minus consumption. As income rises, both consumption and saving increase, but the proportion spent versus saved depends on household preferences. These functions are fundamental for predicting how changes in income affect overall demand. Equilibrium condition in the two-sector model is where aggregate demand equals output. This is represented as Y equals AD, with Y as output and AD as aggregate demand. The determinants of equilibrium output include autonomous spending and the marginal propensity to consume. If either of these changes, the equilibrium shifts. Policymakers monitor these variables to anticipate economic fluctuations and implement corrective measures when necessary. Three-sector model introduces the government into our analysis. Now aggregate demand includes government spending and taxes. The model's equation becomes AD equals C plus I plus G. Taxes reduce disposable income, affecting consumption, while government spending directly increases demand. This model helps us understand fiscal policy's impact on the economy, such as how tax cuts or increased public spending can stimulate growth or stabilize output during downturn. The three-sector model, disposable income is key. It's calculated as YD equals Y taxes plus transfers. Households base their consumption decisions on disposable income, not total income. When the government changes tax rates or transfer payments, it directly influences household spending. This relationship is crucial for understanding the effectiveness of fiscal policy and how it can be used to manage economic cycles. Taxes and government spending have opposite effects on aggregate demand. Higher taxes reduce disposable income and thus consumption, while increased government spending boosts demand directly. The net effect depends on the size of the tax multiplier versus the government spending multiplier. Policymakers must balance these tools to achieve desired economic outcomes, such as stimulating growth or controlling inflation. Fiscal policy multipliers measure how changes in government spending or taxes affect total output. The government spending multiplier is typically larger than the tax multiplier because spending directly increases demand, while tax cuts work indirectly through increased disposable income. The formula for the government spending multiplier is 1/1C1T, where T is the tax rate. Understanding these multipliers helps governments design effective policies for economic stabilization. Equilibrium in the three-sector model occurs when aggregate demand equals output, considering government activity. The equation becomes Y equals Ca plus C, 1T Y plus I plus G, where T is the tax rate. Changes in government spending or taxes shift the equilibrium, affecting output and employment. This model is widely used to analyze fiscal policy short-term effects and to forecast the impact of budget decisions. Four-sector model adds foreign trade to our analysis. Now aggregate demand includes exports and imports. AD equals C plus I plus G plus XM. Exports add to demand while imports subtract from it. This model reflects the real-world complexity of economies interacting globally. Exchange rates, trade policies, and global demand all play roles in determining output and employment in an open economy. Exports represent goods and services sold abroad, while imports are those bought from other countries. Net exports XM can be positive or negative, affecting aggregate demand. A trade surplus XM boosts output while a deficit XM reduces it. Factors like exchange rates, foreign income, and domestic competitiveness influence trade balances and consequently economic growth. In open economy, the multiplier effect is dampened by imports. When income rises, some of the increased demand leaks abroad as imports, reducing the impact on domestic output. The open economy multiplier is 1/1C1T plus M, where M is the marginal propensity to import. This adjustment is crucial for understanding why fiscal policy may be less effective in highly open economies. IS curve represents equilibrium in the goods market, showing combinations of interest rates and output where aggregate demand equals output. A lower interest rate stimulates investment, raising output, while higher rates dampen investment. The IS curve slopes downward, reflecting this inverse relationship. It's a key component of the SLM model, linking the real and financial sectors of the economy. Investment spending is sensitive to interest rates. When rates fall, borrowing becomes cheaper, encouraging firms to invest in new projects. Conversely, higher rates discourage investment. This relationship is captured in the investment function I equals IBI, where B measures sensitivity to interest rates. Understanding this link is vital for analyzing how monetary policy affects the real economy. LM curve shows combinations of interest rates and output where the money market is in equilibrium. It's derived from the demand for and supply of money. As income rises, people demand more money for transactions, pushing up interest rates if the money supply is fixed. The LM curve slopes upward, reflecting the positive relationship between income and interest rates in the money market. Money demand depends on income and interest rates. Higher income increases the need for transactions, while higher interest rates make holding money less attractive compared to interest-bearing assets. The money supply is typically controlled by the central bank. The intersection of money demand and supply determines the equilibrium interest rate for a given level of income. SLM model combines the goods and money markets to determine equilibrium output and interest rates. The intersection of the IS and LM curves shows the unique combination where both markets are in balance. This model is a powerful tool for analyzing the effects of fiscal and monetary policy, as well as external shocks on the overall economy. Fiscal policy, such as changes in government spending or taxes, shifts the IS curve. An increase in government spending moves the IS curve to the right, raising output and interest rates. Conversely, higher taxes shift the IS curve left. The effectiveness of fiscal policy depends on the slope of the LM curve and the responsiveness of money demand to income and interest rates. Monetary policy, such as changes in the money supply, shifts the LM curve. Increasing the money supply lowers interest rates, shifting the LM curve to the right and boosting output. Tightening the money supply has the opposite effect. The SLM model helps us visualize how central banks can influence economic activity through monetary interventions. One limitation of fiscal policy is the crowding out effect. When government spending increases, it can raise interest rates, which may reduce private investment. This effect is more pronounced if the LM curve is steep, meaning money demand is not very responsive to interest rates. Policymakers must consider this trade-off when designing fiscal interventions. Liquidity trap occurs when interest rates are so low that monetary policy becomes ineffective. In this situation, increases in the money supply do not lower rates further or stimulate investment. The LM curve becomes horizontal, and only fiscal policy can boost output. This scenario was observed during major economic downturns, such as the Great Depression and the 2008 financial crisis. SLM-BP model extends the SLM framework to open economies by adding the balance of payments BP curve. This model analyzes how capital flows and exchange rates interact with fiscal and monetary policy. The BP curve shows combinations of output and interest rates where the balance of payments is in equilibrium. It's essential for understanding policy effectiveness in a globalized world. Capital mobility refers to how easily financial capital moves across borders. With perfect capital mobility, the BP curve is horizontal, meaning any interest rate difference triggers large capital flows. With low mobility, the BP curve is steeper. The degree of capital mobility affects how fiscal and monetary policy impact output and exchange rates in an open economy. Countries can choose between fixed and flexible exchange rate regimes. In a fixed regime, the central bank intervenes to maintain the currency's value, while in a flexible regime, the exchange rate is determined by market forces. Each system has advantages and trade-offs, influencing how economies respond to shocks and policy changes. Balance of payments records all economic transactions between a country and the rest of the world. It includes the current account, trade in goods and services, and the capital account, financial flows. Policy decisions can affect the balance of payments, influencing exchange rates and international competitiveness. Persistent deficits or surpluses can signal underlying economic issues. Marshall-Lerner condition states that a currency devaluation will improve the trade balance if the sum of the price elasticities of exports and imports exceeds 1. In other words, for devaluation to work, demand for exports and imports must be responsive to price changes. This concept is vital for understanding the effectiveness of exchange rate adjustments in correcting trade imbalances. Aggregate demand AD and aggregate supply AS are central to understanding economic fluctuations. AD represents total demand for goods and services, while AS shows total output at different price levels. The intersection of AD and AS determines equilibrium output and price level. Shifts in either curve can cause inflation, unemployment, or changes in growth. Keynesian S-curve is horizontal at low output levels, reflecting price rigidity and unemployment. The classical S-curve is vertical at full employment, indicating that output is determined by resources, not prices. Real-world economies often exhibit features of both, with the S-curve becoming steeper as output approaches capacity. Fiscal and monetary policies can shift the AD curve, affecting output and prices. Supply-side policies such as improving productivity or reducing regulation can shift the AS curve. The effectiveness of these policies depends on the economy's position relative to full employment and the flexibility of prices and wages. Pigou effect suggests that falling prices increase real wealth, boosting consumption and aggregate demand. The Keynes effect focuses on how lower prices reduce interest rates, stimulating investment. Both effects highlight mechanisms through which price changes can restore equilibrium, but their real-world impact may be limited by rigidities and expectations. Phillips' curve illustrates the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment in the short run. When unemployment is low, inflation tends to rise and vice versa. However, this relationship can break down if inflation expectations adjust, leading to a vertical long-run Phillips curve at the natural rate of unemployment. Expectations play a crucial role in the Phillips curve. If people expect higher inflation, wage demands rise, shifting the curve upward. Over time, the economy returns to the natural rate of unemployment, but with higher inflation. This insight led to the concept of the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, NAIRU, and the importance of managing expectations in policy. Inflation can be demand pull caused by excess demand or cost push, driven by rising production costs. Mild inflation can stimulate spending, but high or unpredictable inflation erodes purchasing power, distorts prices, and can destabilize the economy. Policymakers aim to keep inflation low and stable to support growth. Inflation is measured by the percentage change in the price level, often using consumer price indexes. Central banks manage inflation through interest rates and money supply controls. In extreme cases, governments may use wage and price controls or adopt currency reforms. The goal is to maintain price stability while supporting economic growth. Unemployment is a key indicator of economic health. It can be frictional short-term transitions, structural mismatch of skills, cyclical due to downturns, or seasonal. The unemployment rate is calculated as the number of unemployed divided by the labor force. Understanding the types and causes of unemployment helps design effective labor market policies. The natural rate of unemployment is the level consistent with stable inflation, reflecting frictional and structural factors. It's not zero, as some turnover is normal. Policies aimed at reducing the natural rate focus on improving labor market flexibility, education, and matching workers with jobs. Labor market equilibrium occurs where labor demand equals labor supply. Wages adjust to balance the number of jobs offered with the number of people seeking work. Factors like minimum wages, unions, and regulations can create imbalances, leading to persistent unemployment or labor shortages. Business cycles are fluctuations in economic activity over time, including periods of expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. They are driven by factors like changes in investment, consumer confidence, technology, and external shocks. Understanding cycles helps policymakers anticipate downturns and design countercyclical measures. Long-term growth depends on factors like capital accumulation, technological progress, and labor force expansion. Sustained growth raises living standards and reduces poverty. Policies that support innovation, education, and investment are key to fostering long-term prosperity. The accelerator principle explains how changes in output can lead to larger changes in investment. When demand rises, firms invest more to expand capacity, amplifying economic fluctuations. This principle, combined with the multiplier effect, helps explain the volatility of business cycles and the importance of stabilizing policies. Stabilization policies aim to smooth out business cycles and maintain steady growth. Fiscal policy adjusts government spending and taxes, while monetary policy manages the money supply and interest rates. Effective stabilization requires timely, targeted, and coordinated actions to address economic shocks and prevent prolonged recessions or overheating. Covered a wide range of macroeconomic models, from the basic two-sector framework to the complexities of open economies and business cycles. Understanding these models helps us make sense of economic fluctuations, policy impacts, and long-term growth. Remember, real-world economies are dynamic and influenced by many factors, but these models provide a solid foundation for analysis and decision-making. Thanks for watching, and keep exploring the fascinating world of macroeconomics.